Hare Krishna. Welcome to another evening in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. My name is Chatratma Das. I'm your host, and we're broadcasting live from the Arctic Circle, or what we would in Florida think the Arctic Circle must be like. It's so cold. But we're ready to toast up all of our hearts and consciousness with the lives of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. So I want to thank you and welcome all of you. If those of you in the chat room, Manjesh, or Bhakta Patrick, or Bhakti and Carol, could just give me a little feedback on the sound and the picture, let me know that everything's okay. Anybody else that's out there, if you'd like to log into our chat room and join any conversations about the program, that'd be great. We also always encourage devotees to let us know where they're tuning in from. It's one of the very wonderful things about Krishna.com is their ability to spread Krishna consciousness through this medium to all corners of the world. Everyone in practically every place on the planet can have an opportunity to tune into the variety of programs, and it's a very wonderful thing that they're doing. So if you would like to start the new year off by helping to support the work of the devotees at Krishna.com, you can go to Krishna.com/donations and follow the instructions there on how you can do that. In your particular temple or community, you may see that there is a webcam in your temple room, and those are also supported by the devotees of those communities so that they can get the opportunities of watching the activities in the morning program if they're not able to make it like that. So, I want to thank you very much for your participation. Okay. So, wanted to... today is the disappearance day of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and yesterday was the disappearance, I believe, of Jayadev Goswami. Now, Gopal Bhatta Goswami we've spoken about quite extensively over many different occasions, and Jayadev Goswami, we just spoke about him just a few weeks ago. But today is also the disappearance day of an individual who we have not had the opportunity to speak about or discuss. Last time we talked in the pastimes of Sarup Damodar, I quoted from Bhaktivinoda Thakur that he said one of the symptoms of love of Godhead awakening and manifesting within the heart is that one develops very intense, what was the actual word? Intimate, selfless friendships with the devotees. And tonight, the individual that we're going to be speaking about is a wonderful example of that. And that personality would be Ramachandra Kaviraja. Ramachandra Kaviraja was the very, very close and intimate friend of Narottam Das Thakur. Of course, Narottam Das Thakur we've spoken about many, many times. We have a large repertoire of information about Narottam that's available. And part of this, of course, involves his deep friendship with Ramachandra Kaviraja. So a little bit of actually, just as how much of a friend, in one of Narottam's songs, one of his most famous songs, Doya Korosi Acharya Prabhu Srinivas Ramchandra Sange Mage Narottama Das. O Srinivas Acharya Prabhu, kindly be merciful unto me. Narottam Das Thakur always prays for the association of Ramachandra Kaviraja. Now I'm sure that as devotees, you have a particular friend in the community, another devotee that you're very close with, someone that maybe you've spent years in devotional service associating with, someone that you have similar interest in the process of devotional service, someone that you can go and confide to when you need counseling or when you need advice or direction, and someone that will know that they can also speak openly and frankly with you. These are this is the glue, if you will, that holds devotee communities together, these types of friendships. And as some of us who are a little bit older, first generation of Prabhupada's followers, begin to continue the process of growing and aging, and we begin to look at 30, 40 years of service with each other, naturally very deep, intimate relationships develop. And these become very sweet because of the fact that they're centered around Krishna consciousness. Now, friendships in the mundane material world are always there. But when you take those friendships and make the friendship with the ultimate friend, Krishna, the center of it, then they become even sweeter. This is the situation we find with Narottam Das Thakur and his dear intimate friend Ramachandra Kaviraja. Ramachandra Kaviraja was actually a disciple of Srinivasacharya. His father was Chiranjeev Sena, and his mother was Sri Sunanda. And you'll remember, or maybe not, but we'll refresh your memory, that Chiranjeev Sena was one of the very, very wonderful devotees of Sri Khanda. So many of those wonderful devotees were there. Actually, he originally lived in Kumar Nagar. And then just after he married, his father-in-law's name was Damodar Kavi. So just after he married Damodar Kavi's daughter, Sri Sunanda, they relocated to Sri Khanda. Chaitanya Charitamrita gives the description that Chiranjeev Sen was a pure devotee who was much loved by Narahari Sakar Thakur and all the residents of Sri Khanda. He was extremely learned in all matters, and his wife was very gentle and chaste. Her activities were completely transcendental. So both mother and father, husband and wife, were very, very respected members of Lord Chaitanya's community and were very advanced in the process of devotional service. Now, there's a long list of the devotees of Sri Khanda, Chiranjeev Sen, and Mukunda, and Narahari, Raghunandana, just to name a few, that would regularly travel and go to the Rath Yatra each year and join the other devotees from Bengal, of course, as we've mentioned, led by Shivananda Singh. So Bhakti Ratnakar states that after relocating there, that the children were born. There were two boys, Govinda Kaviraj and Ramachandra Kaviraja. Bhakti Ratnakar gives a very wonderful description of Ramachandra Kaviraja. He said Ramachandra was very handsome, intelligent, and perseverant. From his very childhood, Ramachandra had a great leaning towards religion and used to behave with the neighbors from a very impartial point of view. He wasn't particular towards any one individual like that. He was a man of high spirits and was as beautiful as the God of beauty himself. He quickly and easily gained knowledge in all types of scriptures. Observing Ramachandra's unique qualities, intelligent people began to speculate he must be the incarnation of some type of deity. By his own will, he has taken birth here in a physician's family, and thus he is not an ordinary person. The Vaishnavas, now this is important, the Vaishnavas observed him and thought if he chooses the path of becoming a Vaishnava, he will get the compassion of many devotees and be the source of inspiration to many Vaishnavas in the future. So this was a very wonderful mood that the devotees appreciated in seeing his qualities. So as time passed, people continued their interest in his activities like that, and were very, very encouraging with him. In the course of time, his father, Chiranjeev Sen, passed away. And the boys were still young enough that they required being looked after and some education. And so Ramachandra and Govinda were sent to their grandfather's house. Their grandfather was a very, very famous individual named Damodar Kaviraj. And he was a very well-known poet. And he was also a Shakti, a worshipper of goddess Durga. Now, of course, this is very, very prominent in Bengal at this time. The Shakti movement is very strong, and the worshippers of Mother Durga, even to this day in Calcutta, Durga Puja is a huge, big thing, almost on par with Janmashtami. It's such a big event. So, now, the father was, a wonderful devotee of Lord Chaitanya, yet the grandfather was the Shakta. So, we do see in the lives of devotees, here in Alachua, we just finished the 7th canto not too long ago, and there you have a wonderful example of Hiranyakasipu, who is a big, big demon, and his child is Sri Prahlad, such a wonderful devotee. And then further down, where we're at in the 8th canto now, the pastimes of Vamana Dev, you have Bali Maharaj, who comes in a line of demons, so to speak, and yet being the leader of the demons, he also has these wonderful Vaishnava qualities. So it is not uncommon to find these types of circumstances in the families that surround a great Vaishnava devotee of the Lord. So at any rate, of course, the boys were younger and they were living with their grandfather, so they became a little influenced by him. And they began to worship the different personifications of Krishna's illusory energy, Durga. So at this same time, Ramachandra, he was the older, and they were growing a little, and he started practicing medicine as well. This was, after all, the family line, so he began to take up the practice of medicine, and also became quite well accomplished as a poet. Now, one day, Srinivasacharya happened to be in Yajagram, which is a very next town over, very close. And he was sitting in his own house there, and many devotees, this is some time after he had been to Vrindavan with Narottam and Srinath and all this. This is all past that point. So he had returned, and he was there and traveling and preaching, and he had gathered a association of devotees, and there was some Krishna Katha going on, some discussion of the different pastimes of the Lord. Now, this happened to be on the day that Ramachandra Kaviraja had just gotten married. And he and his bride were on their way back. They were situated in a very beautiful palanquin. This is the tradition, of course. He and the bride were in the palanquin and being carried by servants and all like that. And as the procession passed through the village of Yajagram, near the home of Srinivasacharya, he could see that he was seated there and conducting this class. It mentions that from a long distance away, Srinivasacharya saw Ramachandra Kaviraja, and Ramachandra Kaviraja also saw Srinivasacharya. They caught eyes with each other. And upon seeing each other from such a distance even, a deep mood of friendship immediately arose within their hearts. These are two eternal devotees of the Lord, appearing in different circumstances to help enact the pastimes of the Lord. And when they recognized each other, this amazing friendship developed. So they began to develop this eagerness to meet each other. Now, seeing Ramachandra Kaviraja, Srinivasacharya then asked his disciples and his followers here, he said, who is this? What is that person's name? Which caste does this individual belong to? Where does he reside? I've not seen anyone like him before. So the associates, they of course knew Ramachandra. He was a very well-respected individual. They said, this is the great scholar Ramachandra. He's an excellent poet. He's a first-class physician. He resides just in the next village, Kumaranagara. And he's also a bit of a Digvijay, very popular speaker and debater. So, hearing all of these things, Srinivasacharya just began to smile internally to himself. So, at the same time, Ramachandra Kaviraja was seated on the palanquin with his wife, and he saw the amazing bodily features of Srinivasacharya. He actually heard, as they went by, he heard his voice. It's such a sweet and melodic voice. So, he became very anxious to meet him. But, he's in the wedding palanquin. He's just been married. He and the wife, they're in this procession, great pomp and, royalty, and going to the wedding dinner. So his wife's name, by the way, was Ratnamala. And so he and Ratnamala, they continued in this way. And they got to the village, and the festivities went on, and they were all very well received and welcoming by the family members. The bride and the bridegroom were all welcomed in this way and brought into the new home, and all of this different festivities going on. And the entire time, Ramachandra Kaviraja's mind was drawn back to this vision he had of Srinivasacharya and this divine personage. So, with great difficulty, it mentions somehow or another he passed through that day, the night, and the next day he returned, and he stayed the night in the house of one Brahmin. So, left his wife there, and he went back to the village, stayed the night in the house of a Brahmin, and on that next morning he approached Srinivasacharya's house. And the Acharya was sitting on the veranda there with some disciples and followers, and immediately went up and offered full obeisances, full dandavats at the lotus feet of Srinivasacharya. And it mentions that Srinivasacharya had also similarly been thinking quite intently about Ramachandra Kaviraja. Who is this individual? How can I arrange to meet him? Such an immediate feeling within his heart. So, upon seeing Ramachandra again, prostrated there on the ground in front of him, he picked him up and he embraced him, brought him right to his chest, and he said the most amazing thing. He said, "Birth after birth, you have been my most dear friend. In the same way that the Lord caused me to meet Narottam Das Mahasaya in Vrindavan, he has also now reunited me with another friend. I now have 2 eyes and 2 arms, and am complete in my friendship with you." Well, very amazing, So, in this way, Ramachandra Kaviraj stayed with Srinivasacharya Prabhu for some time. Srinivas began to teach him in the literatures of the Goswamis, and he spent some time tutoring with him. It mentions that Srinivasacharya was extremely pleased by his gentle nature, his polite behavior, and the very deep spiritual maturity and interest that he had. So the next auspicious day that came up, and of course there are so many different kinds of auspicious days, doesn't say which one, but the next auspicious day that came up, he initiated Ramachandra Kaviraj into, well, actually at this point he was just Ramachandra, but initiated Ramachandra into the Radha Krishna mantra. So after some time of staying with his spiritual master, it was required that he should return home. And so he returned home, all nicely decorated with the 12 markings of Vishnu Tilak, proper Sika, Vaishnava Dodi. And when he came in, the Shaktas, they were all very, very upset. Actually, they're angry. They thought he had taken on the dress of the Vaishnavas and must have accepted initiation into their line. He was wearing the Kuntimala and the Upavitram, the Brahman strut, all of these things. So, they were very, very upset with him, but Ramachandra was undaunted. So, he had his bead bag, and he would sit down in front of them and chant on his mala, the Hare Krishna mantra like this. And so one day, after he was leaving his house, after having taken his bath and going out, the Shakta neighbors called out to him. They said, "Hey, Kaviraj, without worshipping Lord Shiva, how is it that you're staying in your home? Your grandfather was a great devotee of Lord Shiva and has trained you in this way. Why have you given up Lord Shiva's worship?" So Ramachandra, he said, Lord Shiva and Brahma, they are incarnations of the guna avatars of the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Now, of course, we know that there are different gunas, different modes of material nature within this world: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And each one has a predominating deity. Just as there's different types of living entities, each species of living entity has a particular deity, a predominating deity over that aspect of creation, that particular species or that particular nature of consciousness. In the same way, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are the predominating deities, the guna avatars he described, of the mode of ignorance and the mode of passion. They are not supreme within themselves, of course, but they have the position of serving the Supreme by overseeing that aspect of the universal management. So, in this way, he explains in the Sri Krishna, he is the source of all incarnations. And by worshipping Krishna Everyone is satisfied. Just as if you water the tree at the root, then all the leaves are automatically satisfied. This is one of Prabhupada's favorite analogies. So he said in the same way. He said, by taking worship of Lord Krishna, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva will become very satisfied because they are, after all, his devotees. So he gave very, very elaborate scriptural definition and instruction and references and verses and all these different things. And then he gave examples of many great devotees, Sri Prahlad and Dhruva, and how these personalities were all worshippers of Lord Krishna. And they were very, very happy and very satisfying to the Lord. And Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma quite naturally became very kindly disposed towards them. But Ravana, Kumbhakarna, Banasura, all of these demons were only devotees of Lord Shiva and not devotees of Lord Krishna. And thus, what happened to them ultimately? They were all vanquished. So in this way, he explained all these different things. He pointed out that the Shastras say that Lord Brahma was able to create this world due to having successfully worshipped Lord Vishnu. We know this in the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, 2nd canto also, that Lord Brahma found himself in this circumstance and began to engage in the worship of the Supreme Lord Vishnu and was given the potency to perform his service of universal creation. And then he went on to say, similarly, Lord Shiva, he's qualified to invoke auspiciousness in this world due to having the Charnamrita, the foot wash of Lord Vishnu, come on his head in the form of the Ganges River. So they continue with so many different various Shastric statements and all, and speaking like this. And the Shaktas became speechless. They had nothing they could retaliate with, So, in this way, he established himself there, much to the different direction than that of his father, that of his grandfather, who had raised him in that town. As with any devotee, he began to develop within his heart a great desire to go to Vrindavan. But not only to go to Vrindavan because of wanting to go to Vrindavan, but to go to Vrindavan because at that time the Goswamis were residing in Vrindavan. Jiva Goswami was still there, Lokanath Goswami was there, Bhugarbha Goswami was there, the different Rup, Raghunath, they were all still there. They hadn't quite departed yet, I don't believe. At any rate, all the great devotees were still there, so he had this great desire. This is much like the desire we have when Kartik season comes around, for instance. Everyone is anxious to go to Vrindavan because all of these senior devotees of Prabhupada's movement are there. So many wonderful speakers are there. So many opportunities for parikram with gifted devotees who know all the pastimes of the Lord. So in this way, one becomes eager. I want to go to Vrindavan. So in the same way, Ramachandra was very eager to go to Vrindavan. So he petitioned Sri Raghunandana, his senior. He petitioned Mukunda. He petitioned several different Vaishnavas. Please, I want your blessings and your permission to go to Vrindavan. Now, this is an equally important point also. He did not act independently. Oh, I want to go to Vrindavan, therefore I'm going. Okay, goodbye. He sought out the blessings and the permission of the Vaishnavas to fulfill the desire that he had in his service. This is a very important point because one cannot be successful. We were just discussing that earlier this evening. One cannot be successful in life without the association with the Vaishnavas. And what does association mean? It means their blessings. And how does one get blessings? By taking a humble position. Here again, humility is one of the most important and invaluable qualities of a devotee. And by that humility, by taking the blessings, by keeping the association, one can get the full potency to fulfill all of their goals in devotional service, the pursuit of Krishna consciousness. So this is very important. He wanted to go to Vrindavan. He sought out the permission of the Vaishnavas. And what did they say? They all gave him great encouragement. Yes, you should go. You should go. Yes, go to Vrindavan. What a wonderful thing. So in this way, the next day, The very next day, after being given permission and blessings of the devotees, he left for Vrindavan down. Gone. So he traveled in this way and that way, going through Gaya and Kashi and Prayag, and finally arriving in Mathura. We've heard these pastimes of the devotees as they come to Vrindavan, and going to Mathura and going to the Adi Keshava Ghat at Vishram and bathing there, and going to the temple and starting there, and then going around to the Vrindavan forest like that. And at that time, his spiritual master, his guru, Srinivasacharya, was residing in Vrindavan. So, he went and found Ramachandra, went and found Srinivasacharya, offered his dandabats in the dust of Vrindavan, which were at the dust of his spiritual master's lotus feet. Very wonderful like that. And then his spiritual master took him in and introduced him to Jiva Goswami. And then Jiva Goswami asked him to please sit and tell him all about the different devotees in Bengal and how they were doing and how things were going and like that. Just like when you see a devotee you haven't met for some time. Just over the weekend, I met an old friend from New Jersey that lives there and has some very wonderful devotional programs going there. And I asked him, so how's this one and how's that one? And what about this one's children? And this one now must be doing the... So in this way you get some news about the devotees. So Jiva Goswami also wanted to hear, how are the devotees in Bengal doing? How is Mother Janava? What's going on with all the different residents of, how is Shivananda saying all these different pastimes? So very, very nice like that. So in this way, as being ordered by Jiva Goswami, who was the main Mahant in Vrindavan at that time. I guess by this time, yes, Rupa Sanatana must have passed on. Jiva Goswami was overseeing many of the things. Even though Raghunath Das was there, he had turned everything over to Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami arranged for Ramachandra Kaviraja to go and get the darshan of Govindaji and Gopinath and Madan Mohan, and to go to Sanatana Goswami's Samadhi and offer respects Gopal Bhatta and Lokanath Goswami and Bhugarba Goswami. They were all so happy to see Ramachandra Kaviraja and gave their blessings and benedictions to him like that. And after some time of staying there, and the devotees heard some different samples of his poetic ability. So, one who is a writer and author, what to speak of one who's a poet, you go to some place and you want to glorify that place through your art. If a musician goes and takes a big trip, they want to write some music to give some glorification to that. So in the same way, Ramachandra Kaviraja was enjoying Vrindavan so much and began speaking different poetic things and writing different verses. And the Goswamis all became so happy. Bhakti Ratnakar explains that this is where he actually got the title Kaviraj. This was given to him by the Goswamis of Vrindavan because of his poetic abilities like that. So for some time he stayed in Vrindavan. Actually, Bhakti Ratnakar doesn't say for some extended time. It says for some days. How many days we don't know. If we from the west travel to Vrindavan and stay 2 or 3 weeks, we feel, we've only hardly stayed any time at all. So we don't know how many days exactly, but for some days. And then they finally instructed him, okay, now it's time to return back to Bengal. Continue your service there, return to the devotees there. I mean, we should take heart. We go to Vrindavan and we have such a wonderful time. We're so happy in Vrindavan and so satisfied. We want to stay forever. We want to stay and stay. We don't want to go. But even here we see Ramachandra Kaviraja. He was encouraged. Okay, now it's time for you to go. So it's a very rare and special devotee that gets the opportunity to live in Vrindavan full time. So at any rate, he returned, visiting all the different places along the way. And he also, on the way back, he stopped in Sri Navadutam, Sri Mayapur, and visited the different places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes there. And finally, he came to the home of Jagannath Mishra. Sachimata had long passed away. The only person left in the house was old Ishan Prabhu. Ishan Prabhu had been the family servant and then had continued and served Mother Sachi throughout her whole life once her husband had passed away and once young Nimai had gone and taken sannyas, becoming Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He stayed there, and then when she passed away, Vishnu Priya passed away, and he was still there. So he saw, and many of the different devotees, Raghava Pandit, there's so many different ones. Jiva Goswami, when he was much younger, they all went through and they all got the mercy from Ishan Prabhu. All of them got the mercy from Ishan Prabhu. They would take the dust from his feet and then he would embrace them to his chest and cry tears of devotion down upon their heads like this. So, at this point, we begin to see how the friendship starts to find a foundation that will develop between Ramachandra Kaviraja and Narottam Das Thakur. Bhakti Ratnakar gives a very wonderful description of the nature of their relationship. They were considered, their name, Kaviraj and Narottam, were said in the same sentence as one might say Nar Narayan. Bhakti Ratnakar explains that people thought of them in the same thought process. Their names were uttered in the same breath, and in this way they were always connected to each other. Actually, early, even before meeting each other, Narottam Das Thakur one time had this amazing dream. He was feeling great separation from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the process of that, he had one dream. And in this dream, so many amazing things happened. Different devotees that had already departed that he got the opportunity to meet, and different circumstances. But one thing that happened was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally appeared before him and took him by the hands. And he held him, and he said to him, lost my fidgeting with the computer there. And he held him by the hands, Lord Chaitanya held Narottam Das Thakur, and he said to him, he said, you must manifest. First he looked right into his eyes, and he said, you must manifest a new type of kirtan, which will have the potency to mesmerize the people. Now, of course, we all know that Narottam Das Thakur was, at that point forward, developing this special style of kirtan, which is very, very well known. Through your songs and music, you should explain my pastimes and my mission. Don't worry about anything, how you will accomplish it. All your desires will be fulfilled. You should go to the land of Goda as quickly as possible and preach the glories of devotional service. Those who are fortunate enough will take shelter of you. Soon I will arrange that you link up with Ramachandra Kaviraja. He is the son of Chiranjeev and the disciple of Srinivasacharya. What else can I say to you? Do not worry, I will always take care of you. Now, it's amazing because one of the qualities of friendship, there's been all kinds of psychological research done, what to speak of reality, that one of the qualities of friendship is that one feels always protected, one feels fulfilled, one feels that in a close friendship like that, everything is taken care of. There are no worries, no concerns. So Lord Chaitanya is instructing Narottam that I'm going to send you someone like this. Soon you're going to meet that person. And he names him Ramachandra Kaviraja. So then we look in the Narottam Vilas. And in the Narottam Vilas there's a description of how, as the Keturi festival was beginning to formulate itself, the plans were starting to manifest and everything was moving into motion, that after much separation, after a long time of not seeing each other, Narottam met with Srinivasacharya. And of course Srinivasacharya was accompanied by his most prominent disciple, Ramachandra Kaviraja. So Srinivasacharya began to speak with Narottam Das Thakur, what had been going on, how this, and then he introduced, he said, and this is my disciple, Ramachandra Kaviraja. And then he told the story, how he met Ramachandra and how he initiated him, the whole wedding procession. And then he began to glorify the activities of Ramachandra Kaviraja and what a wonderful disciple he was and all like that. And then he began to introduce different devotees, like this. And so in this way, Srinivas then began to sit in a quiet place with Narottam and speak very deeply about the details of devotional service. And he then began to further explain about Ramachandra to Narottam, how he had gotten the name Kaviraj. And then they continued to speak more about the process of devotional service. And then he began to go on. And so in this way, he was really building up what a wonderful devotee this was. So in this way, the festival of Keturi began to take its place. At this time, Srinivasacharya placed Ramachandra Kaviraja completely into the care, hands, and responsibility of Narottam Das Thakur. Now, the amazing thing is that these two were like two personalities with the same thoughts, two personalities of the same mind in their mood of service and in their commitment. Ramachandra Kaviraja was clearly the junior, but the relationship between he and Narottam Das Thakur was much more one of old friends. So as the festival began to develop, Narottam Das Thakur put Ramachandra Kaviraja in charge of this and that. Actually, Ramachandra Kaviraja's particular responsibility, I'll get into that a little bit later. So at any rate, he assisted Narottam very nicely in arranging for the festival. Actually, why not? I'll tell him. So one of the duties he gave him was that Ramachandra Kaviraja, on the morning of the massive cooking for the big feast, on the third day of the festival, for the Gaur Purnim feast, Ramachandra Kaviraja had a group of his associates, and they stood at the door to the kitchen, simply seeing how can we assist the cooks. They were not doing the cooking, but they were there simply to do whatever the cooks need. Oh, I need 5 more pumpkins. Go, one would go and get more pumpkins. Oh, I need someone to cut these squash in this way. One would come and cut the squash in this way. I need this batter, turn this, and one would come and do that. So this was Ramachandra Kaviraja's service during the Keturi festival, was to assist whatever was necessary to help the kitchen function nicely. So the next time we get asked to volunteer to do kitchen service, we can do it in the mood of Ramachandra Kaviraja. Because at every festival, the temple president, the cooks, they all request, please, can we get some help in the kitchen? And we should all eagerly think, yes, Ramachandra Kaviraja did that, let me also do that. So in this way, this was his service during this great and wonderful festival. At any rate, one of the other qualities or aspects that we find of friendship is that there's no rivalry. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Competitiveness. Thank you. There's no mood of competition that trying to, and this was evident, really amazingly, in one particular pastime with Ramachandra Kaviraja and Narottam. They were escorting some friends that had arrived. I figured who it was that had come. They were walking to the Padmavati River with them to take bath. As they were going towards the river, Ramachandra Kaviraja pointed out 2 young boys. And these boys were quite nice young boys. They were herding some goats. So Ramachandra Kaviraja could understand, so he sat down and within earshot of these boys began to discuss with Narottam Das Thakur the different aspects of the process of devotional service. He began to talk about the qualities one develops as a Vaishnava, and about the importance of worshipping Sri Krishna, and about the sanctity of executing devotional service like this within the earshot of the boys. So these 2 boys heard this discussion from a little bit of a distance. They became attracted, and they came over, and they began to tell each other, these different Vaishnavas here, these 2, this must be those 2 famous devotees, Thakur Mahasaya and Kaviraj Goswami. We've heard about them living in the area. That must be them talking. So they went a little closer just to hear like this. And, they're beginning to think, actually, we're pretty fortunate. This is an opportunity for us to hear. So now these two boys happened to, as I mentioned, was the nature of Bengal at that time, belonged to a family of Shaktas, a family of big worshippers of Durga. And these goats had been secured by their father for some sacrifice. And the boys were responsible to bring them there. So, the boys came and they kind of came a little close, and then they sat a little bit. So finally, Thakur Mahasaya turned to them and he said, "Oh, who are you boys? Whose sons are you? Where are you coming from?" So the one boy said, "My name is Hariram. My name is Hariram, and this is my younger brother, Ramakrishna. Shiva Acharya, he is our father. And he spends a lot of money for the worship of Bhavani. And Balaram Kaviraj is the local physician. And we've been ordered by our father to come here and buy these goats. Our father believes that if he sacrifices these goats to the goddess, that then he will attain great happiness in this life and be granted happiness in the heavens afterwards." So after they said this, he presented their case, and then Mahasaya Narottam Das and Ramachandra Kaviraja began to discuss with them and began to talk to the boys about the real purpose of Brahminical life, about the, how shall I say politely, about the horrific karmic activities that were bound for them by engaging this activity of sacrificing these goats, And so they spoke with them in this way. So the boy said, "Truly our hearts have been changed." He said, "By hearing your teachings, we appreciate the glories of the process of devotional service. We desire to become your followers." So they fell on the ground, offering prostrated obeisances. And so it mentions that that happened to be a particularly auspicious day. And so Narottam and Ramachandra each initiated one of the boys. Now, one might think, oh, well, Narottam was the senior, he would initiate them both. But there was no rivalry. The boys had developed an attraction to both of them. So one initiated one initiated the other. This was the manner. It was not, oh, I should take the disciples' own, nothing like that. The boys were attracted in this way, and so that natural, circumstance followed. Kaviraj Goswami, he initiated Hariram, and Thakur Mahasaya, he initiated Ramakrishna. So in this way, the boys, they're very, very fortunate. They met Ramachandra and Narottam. They shaved their heads, had Sika, Vaishnava Tilak, Tulsi Mala, Japa, like this. And in this way, they became completely empowered. And they spent several days staying with their spiritual masters and being trained in the arts of devotional service. Of course, then eventually they had to go home. And when they did, then they, that's a whole other story. But how their father was very much upset, and they then preached to their father and spoke about the glories of devotional service that they had heard from Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraja. And in this way, we were able to become very, very wonderful devotees, very, very fixed in the process of devotional service. So, one other story, one cannot speak about Ramachandra Kaviraja without telling this story, and I have to say it's probably my most favorite story. So, Narottam had been quite successful and quite noticeable in his preaching of Krishna consciousness. And following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, he did not accept any process of discrimination, that only certain castes or only certain personalities could take up devotional service and only certain persons could be initiated in the process of bhakti. He gave to anyone. Lord Chaitanya held nothing back from anyone according to their external material circumstance. He did not take any of that into consideration. Similarly, his followers also did not either. Particularly Narottam Das Thakur was preaching in this way. Ramachandra Kaviraja was continuing this way. The Smarta Brahmanas, those personalities who were shall we say, who were confined by these strict rules and regulations that did not take into account the movement of bhakti, the devotional service that comes from the heart. They could not tolerate this. They couldn't accept the fact that Narottam Das Thakur himself was from a so-called lower caste and that he was initiating those of a higher caste into the Brahminical lifestyle. So they worked up one big disturbance and agitation about the entire thing, creating so much trouble. And they went to the king, Raj Narasimha, and got him and his pundits, Sri Rup Narayana, his main big Digvijay pundit, and worked them all up that we have to do something about this Narottam. We have to crush him and stop him from, he's polluting the Hindu Dharma, and so on like this. So, Raj Narasimha, he's a king. He likes to go out on a crusade, so to speak. And, all right, let's go and we'll deal with this. We'll go and we'll confront Narottam in his home village. So they made a big group, all the Smarta Brahmanas. Yes, we're going to get that Narottam. How dare him try to initiate, and then, on and on like that. And they're all going and then traveling in the big caravan, and the king's coming. And of course, the king never goes by himself. He's got his court, he's got his procession, he's got his servants, so they get to the spot. So finally, they come to the place Narottam is staying in Katuri. And just outside a ways, they're camping. So the next morning, the Brahmins rise, because even though they're smartas, even though they're not the most advanced, they still have their sadhana. This is the importance of Brahminical activity, to have some morning sadhana. So they get up to perform their morning duties, and then of course to be able to cook their morning breakfast. So what they do is they go into the local village. Now, when news came to the villagers that the king and his Brahmins and his pundits have all come and they're going to crush Narottam, the devotees became very concerned. Their concern was not based on fear that Narottam was going to be crushed, or that Narottam was in some concern for his life, but that there would be some inconvenience and difficulty for him. They did not have their faith in Narottam staggered by this. So Ramachandra Kaviraja, he said to Narottam, "You're my dear friend. Do not worry about anything. I will take care of this." He proceeded to get Narottam Das Thakur's senior-most disciple, Ganga Narayan Chakravarti. So Ganga Narayan Chakravarti and Ramachandra Kaviraja, they hatched a plan. They're very intelligent, remember, very intelligent men. So they went to the edge of the town and set up a little market there. And as you go into any town, you first come to a marketplace there. So they set up the first two stalls on opposite sides of the streets. Ganga Narayan Chakravarti put on some drab, tattered clothing and became a panwala, selling pan and betel nut and things of this nature. And across the street, any of you that have been to any have seen this type of person, not necessarily the most elevated, not necessarily the best and most well-dressed. The qualities of cleanliness will not necessarily be the first thing you'll think when you see their presentation. Across the street, Ramachandra Kaviraja had arranged to sell pottery. He had collected different types of pots on a potter's wheel and everything set up like that. And so they sat there in the morning and they were prepared, waiting for the Brahmins and the king to come. So as I mentioned, the Brahmins rose early, went into town to purchase their pots and their vegetables and their things they need for their morning. And they first come upon this pot shop where they need to go, and they approach the wala. And the pot wala, Ramachandra Kaviraja, in the most eloquent Sanskrit, addresses them. Basically, hey guys, what's going on? I must admit, I don't know what the Sanskrit version of that is, and they were a bit startled, because Sanskrit was only known to the highest of Brahmanas. Common people did not learn Sanskrit. So he asked, "Oh, what are you here for?" "Oh, we are," they began to speak. Said, oh, you're going to speak with Narottam. Oh, that's very wonderful. He's such a great personality. But, before you speak with him, I wonder, do you know, such and such? And he threw out a particular verse and then challenged with a particular point of view and then gave another idea. And so on and on. Ramachandra Kaviraja is speaking with these pundits and begins to debate with them about their actual qualification and their knowledge of Shastra. And all of this is going on in perfect Sanskrit, and the Brahmins are going back and forth with Ramachandra Kaviraja, and in this way they're becoming shocked. And in the meantime, Ganganarayan Chakravarti, who's across the street in his little pawn shop, calls out to his friend Ramachandra in the most eloquent of Sanskrit, "Hey Baba, what's going on?" Or some reasonable facsimile. And so he startles the Brahmins. They turn, and here's this panwala speaking the most eloquent of Sanskrit. So they change their attention over to him. Well, wait a minute. You know Sanskrit also? Oh, sure, I'm a disciple of Narottam. All of Narottam's disciples are well versed like this. You mean you, a panwala? Oh, most certainly. Ask me anything. So they began to challenge him, and he begins to debate them and defeat them. So the Brahmins become very worried. And then Ramachandra Kaviraja throws in something, and then the Brahmins are going back and forth from one side of the street to the other, and Ganganarayan Chakravarti will bring a report, and Ramachandra, and back and forth like this. And they completely frustrated the Brahmins. The Brahmins actually began to converse amongst themselves, quite fearful. What are we going to do now? We've come to challenge this Narottam, and these are some of his lower disciples, a panwala and a pot maker, and they've completely defeated us with their knowledge of Sanskrit. We have to call the whole thing off. So they go back to Rupnarayana, the head Brahmin, and Raj Narasimha. They say, oh, we've made a terrible mistake. We should stop all this. And the king says, no, why? Rupnarayana says, no, we have come this far. We should complete. So at any rate, they continued in, and then they met with Narottam, and of course they were all thoroughly defeated, and they ultimately became Narottam's disciples. So in this way, Ramachandra Kaviraja, due to his deep friendship and his deep concern for the well-being of Narottam Das Thakur, he completely was able to step forward and prevent any type of difficulty from happening to him and saving him in this way. There were, of course, in this circumstance, many, many different personalities throughout the course of Ramachandra Kaviraja's life that became his followers, many sinful atheists, many followers of the Shakti path that, because of his having done that and left, they also then in turn came and took up the same path he had. So after some time, just some long time, on the order and encouragement of Srinivasacharya, he again returned to Vrindavan. And when Ramachandra went back to Vrindavan, he didn't find there the darshan Goswamis. They were all departed. He didn't find any of the Vaishnavas that he was expecting to see there. And he felt greatly alone. He was without Narottam. He did not have the association of the Goswamis of Vrindavan. And this gave him great distress in his heart. And this distress caused him so much pain that he decided he could no longer stay within this material world. In Braj Leela, in the eternal abode of the Lord, his gopi name is Karuna Manjari. He was one of the gopi associates of Radha and Krishna. And he decided no longer could he stay here, and he left his body and returned to that spiritual abode. Narottam Das Thakur heard of this just shortly after he had heard of the departure of Srinivasacharya, and this is of course that famous song we sing, Yeyani Lo Plemadana. This was written at a time where Narottam Das Thakur was lamenting greatly the loss of his dear friend Srinivasacharya and his most intimate associate Ramachandra Kaviraja. There's a very nice song Ramachandra Kaviraja has written, and I would like to conclude with that song this evening here. Just see, brothers, how Sri Gauranga has arisen like a golden moon. Just as the full moon has arisen in the sky, another, fuller moon arose in the form of the Gora Avatar, just to deliver us all from this dark age of ignorance. His mercy takes away all the sufferings of the jiva souls. Japa, mantras, austerities, and other rituals are all useless for purification in the age of Kali. The only means of purification in the age of Kali is the Hare Krishna mantra. Mahaprabhu is so kind that he has manifested the nectar of the holy name, so that all the souls in this dark age may be released from the cycle of repeated birth and death and the hellish life in the lower planetary systems, and thus experience divine love. Whether one is blind or dumb, it does not matter. Everyone can drown in this inundation of the love of Godhead. In this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has drowned everyone with love of God. But alas, Ramachandra Das is so unfortunate he could not even taste a drop of that nectar. So this is the mood of the sincere, humble, advanced devotee of the Lord, eternal associate of Sri Gaura Hari, and the most intimate friend of Narottam Das Thakur. So we'll finish there for the evening. And if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can put them in the chat room here. I see Bhaktin Carol's already asking. Ramachandra Kaviraja was a Manjari. Karuna Manjari was the name he was known by. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to post them up. We would like to just thank all of you once again for joining us and remind you that the Lives of the Vaishnavacharyas is a every other week program for now. So we will not be with you next week, but we'll be with you the week after. We want to thank all of you that are regularly there encouraging us. Manjesh, Bhaktin Carol, Bhakta Patrick, all the different devotees that are there. It's very, very wonderful to get a little encouragement in this way. And, if we can be of any service, feel free to contact us through Krishna.com. And as I mentioned, if you're inclined and would like to help support the activities of Krishna.com, feel free to go to their website, Krishna.com/donations. I'll put the spelling here in the chat room